Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Winemaker Wednesday. In our last video, we talked about and introduced the concept of sustainability, what it is, why it's important to the Lost Sierra Wine Company. So today, as promised in the last video, we're going to dive into one of those topics, just one single area. I mentioned in the last video that I'm a self-avowed cork dork, so today we're going to talk about cork. I know, super exciting, right? Actually, you're going to love this story. There's so much to talk about here, so let's get to it. Before we dive deep into natural cork, we should talk broadly just for a second about wine bottle closures, as we say in the business. There's a few different types. You're probably familiar with many of them. There's a standard cork, as we would say, a stamped cork. There's a technical cork, which is what we use here at the Lost Sierra Wine Company. There are glass stoppers. Rare, you see them once in a while, especially on rosés from southern France for some reason. Synthetic cork, plastic cork, essentially. Of course, the last one that we've all seen and are very familiar with, especially from southern hemisphere winemaking regions, the screwcaps, super common these days. You see them across the price ranges of wines. So those are the main type of wine closures for a standard wine bottle. Today we're going to focus on a technical cork, and that's what we use here at the Lost Sierra Wine Company. So what is a technical cork? Well, it's natural cork, basically, but it's been put through a special process that removes all of the taint. They take natural cork, they grind it up into fine granules, they put it in a column, and they run a whole bunch of CO2 or carbon dioxide, both in a gas and a liquid state, past the granules, and it removes 100% of the taint. This process of using supercritical CO2, as it's called, is unique to the DM corks that we use. This process removes all of that cork taint. It, by definition, cannot have any cork taint in a technical cork. Interesting side note, it was actually Folgers Coffee back in the 50s that developed this process to remove caffeine to make decaffeinated coffee. So, interesting side note. After the granules have been washed, if you will, with CO2 and all the taint removed, put it in a mold, reform it back into the cork shape that we know today. I don't have to worry about our wines having taint in them. You, as a consumer of our wines, don't have to worry about our wines having taint in them. You just get to pull a cork and enjoy the wine. It's really that simple, and it should be that simple. So it would seem obvious why we would choose to use a cork like this. From a pure winemaking and consumer standpoint, our corks can't have cork taint in them, and that's probably reason enough. But that's not the only reason that we choose to use technical corks. Technical corks come from natural cork, and natural cork has an amazing sustainability story. And that's what I want to share with you next. So our technical corks have an amazing sustainability story. First and foremost, they are natural cork. Natural cork is the bark of an oak tree. So these oak trees are largely grown in Spain and Portugal. In fact, Portugal has the largest oak forests in the world. They've been protecting their forests for over 800 years. Since 1209, by law, they've been protecting their forests. So over 800 years, that's an amazing sustainability story. I think by definition, that's sustainable, right? These trees live for between 150 to 200 years. After a period of maturity, from acorn to maturity, then they get harvested, or the bark is harvested from the trees every 9 to 12 years. So 100% of the cork is used after harvest. Nothing goes to waste. Most cork gets turned into corks. But there are other products. So think of your Birkenstock sandals or floorboards, wallboards, those sorts of things. So the rest of the cork gets used for all of those sorts of products. Little known fact, cork, it's a natural product, so it can and actually should be recycled. You should check out recork.com for a cork drop-off center near you. We'll put the link to recork.com in the comments below. Another element of the sustainability of natural cork is the forests themselves, right? So You can imagine there's tens of thousands of oak tree forests that produce bark around Spain and Portugal and these other countries. They support a vast array of biodiversity, including endangered animal species. So it's incredibly important for the wine industry to have these cork forests, but for Spain and Portugal and the world at large, the biodiversity that's supported within these forests is absolutely critical. And beyond the biodiversity that's supported by the forest, the trees themselves are doing their part. So as we all know, trees absorb carbon dioxide. These trees, in fact, because their bark is harvested, it actually stimulates them to absorb even more CO2. More trees, more harvesting, less CO2, positive impact on climate change. Another factor in us deciding to use these technical corks is the fact that they have a known amount of oxygen transfer. So why? What's important about that, and what's the benefit? Because the cork, natural cork, is ground into the granules, as we talked about, and then molded back into a cork shape, the density of the cork is known. As the density is known, the oxygen transfer rate is known. So the transfer rate of oxygen from outside the bottle to inside the bottle. Because that's known, we then know how much oxidation or aging of the wine will happen over time. Because I can select a cork that has greater density, thus less oxygen transfer, the oxidation risk to the wine will be less. Less oxidation risk to the wine means I get to add fewer sulfites. Sulfites help protect against oxidation. So it all comes together with a natural cork that's been produced to have a certain density and oxygen transfer rate, meaning that the wine's better protected underneath that cork, and I get to add fewer sulfites. And that's certainly what we all are looking for. No one wants to add anything to wine beyond what it actually needs, the minimum amount. So add the least amount of protective sulfite that we can to the wine to help it age over the life of the wine. So again, it gets to you with tasting exactly the way I intended it to taste. The final reason, and certainly the first and foremost reason of why we would use these corks, is simply they're taint-free. No one will ever get a bad bottle of wine because of cork taint from the LSWCo wine company. I can feel confident knowing that every time I put one of these corks in a bottle of our wine and it gets delivered to a consumer buys it in a store, it's never going to be bad because of the cork. And that's still a somewhat common occurrence in the industry and the business today. That's why sommeliers or waiters still bring you, when they open a bottle at your table and they set the cork next to you, and you're supposed to look at the cork and, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. But then they pour a small sample of the wine in the glass and they ask you to sniff it and taste it and proclaim that it's good or not. And how many of us are really actually comfortable with that whole sort of ritual anyway, right? You don't have to worry about that with these corks or with our wines. It's not a thing. Well, there you have it. We've covered a lot today. We've talked all about why we've selected these amazing technical corks. They're taint-free, first and foremost. That's reason enough. They allow us to add fewer sulfites to the wine. I like that. You should like that as well. And they have this amazing sustainability story. I hope you learned something in that. I learned a few things actually while putting this together. And it's an amazing story that just doesn't get told. And so really happy to bring that to light, share it with all of you here today. And finally, before we conclude, I want to give a shout out to DM. They are the manufacturer of the technical corks that we use. Without them, this video wouldn't have been possible. They provided some of the amazing B-roll that you've seen here, the cork harvesting and the cork trees, forests in Portugal, as well as some of the background information that they've provided to help put all this together. So thank you to DM, really appreciate it, and we love the cork. And in the next video, we'll tackle another aspect of sustainability. So stay tuned, hit like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.